My granddaughter asked me why her mommy wouldn't wake up, and that was the moment I decided to become a kidnapper at the age of 72. I knew the police would call it an abduction, and I knew the courts would call it a felony, but looking at the bruise forming on her innocent arm, I called it a rescue mission. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you believe family is worth fighting for. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think a grandfather has the right to break the law if it means saving his grandchild? Or should I have trusted the system that failed us a dozen times before? Pause the video, leave your comment, and let's get into the story. My name is Garvin. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer. My job was to make sure things didn't fall apart. I inspected foundations, checked load-bearing walls, and calculated stress points. It is ironic, then, that while I was ensuring the safety of skyscrapers and bridges, my own family foundation was rotting away from the inside out. I have a daughter named Sarah. She was once the light of my life, a bright girl with a smile that could end a war. But addiction does not care about how bright you were. It only cares about how dark it can make your future. Sarah lost her husband 3 years ago to a car accident. That was the crack in the foundation. Instead of patching it with therapy or family support, she filled the void with vodka. It started slow, a glass of wine to sleep, then a bottle to get through the day, and finally, hard liquor to simply exist. Caught in the middle of this collapse was Lily, my granddaughter, 7 years old. She has my eyes and her grandmother's patience. I tried to do things the right way. I really did. I want you to understand that I am a man who respects order. I paid my taxes early. I never ran a red light. When I saw Sarah spiraling, I stepped in as a father. I offered to pay for rehab. I offered to take Lily for the weekends. I cleaned her house when the smell of mildew and stale beer became too overpowering for a child to live in. Sarah would weep, promise to change, and stay sober for 3 days. Then, the cycle would repeat. The system is designed to keep families together, even when they should be torn apart. I called Child Protective Services 4 times. 4 times. Each time, they gave Sarah a heads up. She would scrub the house, hide the bottles, and put Lily in a nice dress. The social worker would come in, see a grieving widow trying her best, and look at me like I was a bitter old man trying to control his adult daughter. They saw a satisfactory living environment. I saw a ticking time bomb. The breaking point didn't happen with a scream. It happened with a whisper. It was a Tuesday in November, a cold, rainy Tuesday. I stopped by Sarah's rental house, a small, dilapidated bungalow that I was helping her pay rent on. I had a bag of groceries because I knew there was likely nothing in the fridge but condiments and ice. I knocked. No answer. I had a key, meant for emergencies, and I used it. The smell hit me first. It wasn't just alcohol anymore. It was something sour. Unwashed laundry, rotting food, and neglect. The living room was a minefield of shattered glass and tipped-over furniture. In the center of the couch lay Sarah, passed out, her mouth open, a stain on her shirt. She looked like a corpse. For a terrifying second, I thought she was. I checked her pulse. It was there, thumping away, fueling the poison in her veins. I found Lily in the kitchen. She was sitting on the floor in front of the open refrigerator. The light from the fridge was the only illumination in the gloom. She was wearing a summer dress, shivering, trying to spoon dry cereal into her mouth from a box. She looked up at me, and she didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked tired. A 7-year-old should never look that tired. I saw the mark on her arm. It was a handprint. A dark, purple bruise wrapping around her bicep. I asked her what happened. She whispered that Mommy got mad when the milk spilled. Mommy squeezed too hard. I took a picture of the bruise. I took a picture of the house. I took a picture of Sarah passed out. I drove straight to the police station, leaving Lily there because I was afraid that if I took her then, I would be arrested for kidnapping before I could file a report. I thought the evidence was enough. The officer at the desk looked at the photos. He looked at me. He sighed, the way a man sighs when he is tired of paperwork. He told me that without a visible wound requiring hospitalization or a direct witness to the assault, they couldn't just remove a child. He said they would send a welfare check in the next 24 hours. He told me it was a civil matter regarding custody and that I should contact a family lawyer. A welfare check in 24 hours. I walked out of that station, and the rain felt like ice on my skin. I sat in my truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I realized then that the law was a structure built on paper, and paper tears. I could hire a lawyer. We could go to court. It would take months. In those months, Sarah might drive drunk with Lily in the car. She might leave the stove on. She might squeeze a little harder next time. I was not going to wait for a funeral to be vindicated. I drove home. I went into my garage. I packed 2 suitcases. I packed my clothes, my blood pressure medication, and a substantial amount of cash I had been saving for a boat I was never going to buy. I went into the attic and found a box of old toys I had kept from when my own children were small. I put them in the trunk. I felt a strange calm wash over me. It was the calm of a man who has analyzed the structural integrity of a situation and realized the only solution is a controlled demolition. I waited until 2 a.m. I drove back to Sarah's house. The street was silent. The rain had turned into a steady drizzle. I parked 2 blocks away. I didn't want the sound of the engine to wake anyone, specifically the nosy neighbor who spent all day watching from her porch. I walked through the wet leaves, the collar of my coat turned up. I felt like a criminal. I suppose I was. But as I approached that dark house, I didn't feel guilt. I felt purpose. I let myself in. The house was exactly as I had left it, only colder. Sarah hadn't moved. She was still on the couch. I walked past her without looking down. She was my daughter, and I loved her, but in that moment, she was the enemy. I went into Lily's room. She was asleep on a mattress that had no sheets, curled up under a thin blanket. I sat on the edge of the bed and placed my hand gently on her shoulder. She flinched. That flinch broke my heart more than the bruise. I whispered her name. She opened her eyes, wide and fearful, until they focused on me. "Grandpa?" she whispered. I told her we were going on a trip. I told her we were going to play a game called Quiet Mouse. We had to be very, very quiet. I told her to pack her backpack with her favorite things. She didn't ask about her mother. She didn't ask when we were coming back. She just nodded, trusting me with that absolute, terrifying faith children have in the adults they love. We packed her school bag. I took her coat. I picked her up, even though she was getting too big to carry, because I didn't want her shoes to squeak on the floorboards. We were in the hallway when the floorboard creaked under my weight. It was a loud, dry snap that echoed through the silent house. From the living room, Sarah groaned. I froze. Lily buried her face in my neck. I heard the rustle of the couch cushions. Sarah mumbled something incoherent, her voice thick and slurred. She called out a name, but it wasn't Lily's. It was her dead husband's name. Then, silence. She had fallen back into the abyss. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and carried my granddaughter out into the night. Buckling her into the back seat of my truck felt like sealing a pact. As soon as that click sounded, there was no going back. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore. I was a fugitive. I started the engine. It roared to life, sounding louder than a jet engine in the quiet neighborhood. I pulled away from the curb, watching the rearview mirror, waiting for lights to flick on in the house. Nothing. Just darkness. We drove for 3 hours in silence. Lily fell asleep almost immediately. I drove south, then west, sticking to the back roads, avoiding the toll booths and the cameras. My mind was racing. I needed a place to go, a place where nobody would look for a retired engineer and a 7-year-old girl. I couldn't go to a hotel. They asked for ID. I couldn't go to a relative. They would call Sarah. I remembered a man I had met years ago on a job site. A guy who owned several rental properties in different states, usually run-down places he bought for cash and fixed up off the books. I didn't know him well, but I knew he didn't ask questions if the rent was paid in advance. I had his number written in an old address book I kept in the glove compartment. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, I pulled into a diner parking lot 300 miles away from home. I looked at Lily in the back seat. She was sleeping peacefully, her thumb near her mouth. The bruise on her arm was visible in the morning light. I knew my phone would start ringing soon. I knew Sarah would wake up, find the house empty, and panic. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she wouldn't notice until noon. Eventually, the police would be called. An Amber Alert might be issued. My face, and Lily's face, would be on the news. I took the SIM card out of my phone and snapped it in half. I went inside the diner to use the payphone, one of the few left in the country. I dialed the number from my book. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. I didn't give my name. I just asked if the property in the next state over was still empty, and if he still took cash. He gave me an address and a location of a hidden key. He didn't ask who I was. We got back in the car. Lily woke up and asked if we could have pancakes. I told her yes. We could have anything she wanted. As we ate breakfast in that roadside diner, watching the trucks roll by on the highway, I realized I had blown up my life. I would lose my pension if I was caught. I would lose my freedom. I would likely die in prison. But as Lily poured syrup over her pancakes, she smiled. It was a real smile. I reached across the table and wiped a crumb off her cheek. "We have a long drive ahead of us, sweetie," I said. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," I told her. I didn't know it then, but the place we were heading, a small dusty town in the middle of nowhere, wasn't just a hideout. It was a collision course. The landlord I was renting from wasn't the man I spoke to on the phone. The man on the phone was just a middleman. The owner was a man named Pablo, and while I was running from a family that was trying to destroy me through neglect, Pablo was fighting a war against a family that was trying to destroy him through greed. I paid the check, grabbed Lily's hand, and we walked out to the truck. I was Garvin, the kidnapper, and I had never felt more like a grandfather in my life. This is where I leave you for now. I am currently miles away from home, watching the sun go down over a landscape I don't recognize. I have broken the law, but I have saved her spirit. Here is my message to you, the viewer. If you saw a child drowning, you would jump in the water, even if a sign said no swimming. I saw my granddaughter drowning in her mother's addiction. I jumped in. Do you think the law is always right, or is there a higher moral duty to protect the innocent? Let me know in the comments below. My daughter-in-law told me that I was losing my mind because I couldn't find my reading glasses, but I knew exactly where they were. I knew she had hidden them behind the microwave to gaslight me into signing over power of attorney. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, ate my dinner, and silently finalized the plan to make her homeless by the end of the month. If you enjoy stories where the greedy get exactly what they deserve, please smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I want to ask you a question. At what point do you stop supporting your adult children? Is it when they stop respecting you or when they start plotting against you? Leave a comment with your prediction on how this ends. My name is Pablo. I am 68 years old. I was born in a country where you respected your elders not because it was the law, but because it was the only way to survive. I came to America 40 years ago with nothing but a strong back and a knowledge of masonry. I built walls, I laid driveways, and eventually I started my own construction company. I built the house I live in with my own 2 hands. I poured the foundation. I framed the roof. Every nail in this four-bedroom colonial holds a drop of my sweat. It is my kingdom, or at least it was, until Jessica moved in. I have one son, Mateo. He is a good man, or he used to be. Somewhere along the way, he lost his spine. He married Jessica 5 years ago. I didn't like her from the start. She had a way of looking at things, furniture, cars, houses, like she was calculating their resale value. But Mateo loved her, and I loved Mateo, so I welcomed her into the family. 2 years ago, Mateo came to me with his head in his hands. He said he had made some bad investments. They were drowning in debt. They needed to sell their condo. He asked if they could move in with me just for 6 months while they got back on their feet. My wife, Maria, God rest her soul, had passed away the year prior. The house was big and empty. I was lonely. I said yes. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The first month was fine. The second month, the changes started. Jessica didn't like the smell of my cooking. She said my spices were offensive. She didn't like the volume of the television when I watched the news. She didn't like that I woke up at 5 a.m. to drink coffee on the porch. By month 6, they hadn't saved a dime. In fact, Jessica pulled up in a brand new luxury SUV. When I asked Mateo about it, he looked at his shoes and mumbled something about reliable transportation. By year 1, I was a guest in my own home. Jessica began to treat me like a senile toddler. She spoke to me in that high-pitched, slow voice people use for dogs and idiots. "Pablo, did you take your pills today?" she would ask, even though she knew I never missed a dose. "Pablo, you're making a mess in the kitchen again." Then the gaslighting started. It was subtle at first. Keys would go missing and reappear in the refrigerator. My appointment book would be moved. I would turn off the stove, and an hour later, I would find it on. She would sigh, loud and dramatic, and say, "Oh, Pablo, you're getting so forgetful. It's dangerous." I am not forgetful. I run a business. I manage 3 rental properties across 2 states. I do my own taxes. But she was painting a picture for Mateo, a picture of a man in cognitive decline, a man who needed to be managed. The breaking point came last Sunday. I was in the garage tinkering with my old truck. The garage door was closed, but the door leading to the kitchen was cracked open. They didn't know I was there. I heard Jessica's voice. It was sharp and cold. "We can't keep doing this, Mateo. He's a liability. Did you see he left the back door unlocked again?" "I don't think he did, Jess," Mateo said, his voice weak. "I think you might have—" "Don't you dare!" she snapped. "He is losing it. I looked into that facility, Sunset Meadows. They have a bed opening next month. It's affordable. It takes his Social Security check, and the rest is covered by Medicare." "Sunset Meadows is a dump, Jess. It smells like urine." "It is a secure facility," she hissed. "And once he's in there, we can finally focus on this house. We need to update the kitchen. That outdated tile he loves has to go. The market is hot, Mateo. If we renovate, we can refinance and pull out enough cash to pay off the car and take that trip to Cabo." I stood in the garage, holding a wrench, my heart pounding in my chest. They weren't just planning to put me in a home. They were planning to gut my house, the house I built for Maria, and use it as a piggy bank for their vanity. I gently closed the garage door and went for a drive. I drove to my lawyer's office. His name is Saul. He's been with me for 30 years. I told him everything. I told him about the missing keys, the unlocked doors, the brochure for Sunset Meadows. Saul asked me what I wanted to do. He suggested an eviction notice. He said, "Pablo, in this state you have to give them 30 days, but since they are family, it could get messy. If they claim tenancy rights, it could take months." I shook my head. "I don't have months, Saul. She wants me gone in 30 days. I need a nuclear option." We looked at my assets. I owned the big house in the suburbs, the one they were infesting. I also own a duplex in the city and a rundown farmhouse with a guest cabin about 4 hours west, in a rural area surrounded by nothing but cornfields and silence. I want to sell the house, I said. Saul looked at me. The house you're living in, with them inside? Yes, I said. But not on the market. I don't want open houses. I don't want signs in the yard. I want to sell it to one of those we buy cash investors. The ones who buy properties as is and close in 2 weeks. Saul warned me I would lose money. He said I could get 20% more if I listed it properly. I told him I didn't care about the money. I cared about the look on Jessica's face. I signed the paperwork that day. We found a buyer within 48 hours. A corporate investment firm that turned single-family homes into high-yield rentals. They didn't care about the condition. They didn't care about the tenants. They agreed to a quick close. Now came the performance of a lifetime. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part. I shuffled my feet when I walked. I let Jessica find my keys in the fruit bowl. When she brought up Sunset Meadows over dinner, suggesting it was a vacation resort for seniors, I nodded vaguely and said, "Maybe you're right. I am getting tired." I saw the greed flash in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought I was surrendering. The closing date was yesterday. The money was wired to my account at 10 a.m. The deed was transferred. Technically, as of that moment, none of us owned the house. We were all trespassing. I waited until dinner. Jessica had made a pot roast. She was in a good mood, probably measuring the windows for new drapes in her mind. Mateo was eating silently. "So, Pablo," Jessica said, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Mateo and I were thinking, we should go visit Sunset Meadows this weekend, just to look. No pressure." I wiped my mouth with my napkin. I sat up straight. I dropped the shuffle. I dropped the confused old man act. I looked her dead in the eye with the intensity that had stared down union bosses and building inspectors for 40 years. "That won't be necessary," I said. My voice was clear and strong. Jessica blinked. "Excuse me? I won't be going to Sunset Meadows, and you won't be renovating the kitchen." She laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "What are you talking about? You're confused again." "I am not confused, Jessica. I am liquidated." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and slid it across the table. It was a copy of the sale agreement. "I sold the house," I said. Silence. The kind of silence that happens after a car crash. Mateo picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. "Dad, what is this?" "I sold the house to Generic Investment Corp.," I explained calmly. "We closed this morning. The money is in my retirement account. It is untouchable." You can't do that," Jessica shrieked. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over. "We live here. This is our home." "No," I corrected her. "This was my home. You were guests. And guests who try to institutionalize their host are no longer welcome." "But where will we go?" Mateo asked, his face pale. "The new owners take possession in 7 days," I said. "They are very aggressive with evictions. I suggest you start packing. The money from the sale is mine. I am not sharing it. You have jobs. You have that expensive car. Figure it out." Jessica started screaming. She called me a senile old bat. She called me a monster. She threw her wine glass at the wall. It shattered, staining the wallpaper she hated so much. I stood up. "I'm leaving tonight," I said. "I'm driving out to my property in the West. The farmhouse. I'm going to retire there, alone, in peace." "You can't leave us," she screamed. "We have nowhere to go." "You have 30 days before the new owners call the sheriff," I said. "I'd use that time wisely." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them screaming at each other. My bags were already packed in the truck. I had moved my tools out the night before. I walked out the front door and took a deep breath. The air tasted like freedom. I got into my truck and started the engine. I didn't look back. I drove for 4 hours into the night. The anger slowly faded, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. I had won, but I had also lost. I had lost my son to a woman who wanted to bury me, but I had kept my dignity. I arrived at my farmhouse around 3 a.m. It's a simple place, a main house that needs a new roof and a small guest cabin about 100 yards away across a field. I had rented the guest cabin out a few days ago to a man who called me from a payphone. He sounded desperate, said he had a granddaughter and paid in cash. I didn't ask questions. Cash is king. As I pulled up the long gravel driveway, I saw a light on in the guest cabin. A truck was parked outside. An older model, well maintained. I parked my truck in front of the main house. I was exhausted. I was an old man starting over in the middle of nowhere. But as I stepped out onto the gravel, I looked up at the stars. They were bright out here. No city lights to drown them out. I am Pablo. I am a builder. And tomorrow, I start building a new life. This is the end of my struggle with Jessica. But it seems my life in this remote place is just beginning. My tenant seems quiet, but there is something about him that feels heavy, like he is carrying a burden as big as mine. So here is my message to you. I chose to burn my legacy to the ground rather than let an ungrateful person steal it. Was I too harsh? Should I have given my son another chance even though he stood by while his wife planned my demise? Or is a man entitled to the fruits of his labor until his last breath? Let me know in the comments. I hid a fugitive in my guest cabin, and he helped me fight off the family trying to institutionalize me. We were two old men with nothing left to lose, standing on a porch against a world that wanted to discard us. By the time the sheriff arrived, we had exposed a web of lies that would destroy two families. If you believe that blood is not always thicker than water, and that loyalty is found in the strangest of places, please subscribe to the channel. I need you to comment below. Do you think two wrongs can make a right? Can a kidnapping and a vengeful eviction result in justice? Pause the video, leave your vote, and listen to the conclusion of our story. My name is Pablo. It was 3 a.m. when I arrived at my farmhouse, escaping the wreckage of the life I had burned down back in the suburbs. The air was cold and still. The only light for miles came from the small guest cabin across the field where my mysterious cash-paying tenant was staying. I was too tired to investigate. I went into the main house, which smelled of dust and cedar, and slept on an old cot in the living room. I woke up to the sound of hammering. I made a pot of strong coffee and walked out onto the porch. Across the field I saw him. A man, roughly my age, maybe older, was up on a ladder repairing the gutter of the guest cabin. A little girl was sitting on the grass nearby, handing him nails. I walked over. My joints were stiff, and my heart was heavy from the confrontation with my son Mateo and his harpy wife Jessica. But the morning sun felt good. I didn't know the rent included maintenance, I called out. The man froze. He looked down from the ladder. He had a face carved from granite, deep lines around eyes that were constantly scanning for threats. This was Garvin. It was sagging, he said, climbing down slowly. Bad for the drainage. Water gets in the foundation, the whole thing rots. You know about foundations? I asked. I was a structural engineer, he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. I'm Garvin. Pablo, I said. I'm the owner. And the fugitive, apparently. He looked at me sharply. Fugitive? My family wants to put me in a home. I sold the house out from under them and ran away. Garvin let out a short, dry laugh. Sounds familiar. We sat on the porch of the cabin as the little girl, Lily, played in the tall grass. She was quiet. Too quiet for a child her age. I saw the bruise on her arm. It was fading, yellow and green, but it was the shape of a hand. I looked at Garvin. He saw me looking. He didn't flinch. She's my granddaughter, Garvin said. I took her. Her mother is an addict. The state wouldn't help. So I helped myself. In any other life, I might have called the police. I am a man of the law. But looking at that little girl, and feeling the fresh sting of my own betrayal by my son, I realized the law doesn't always protect the innocent. Sometimes, it protects the monsters. You need supplies? I asked. We need food, he admitted, and I can't go into town. My face might be on the news. I'll go, I said. I have to get supplies for myself anyway. I'm digging in for a siege. For the next 3 days we existed in a strange, peaceful limbo. We were 2 grandfathers running a sanctuary for the unwanted. Garvin fixed the plumbing in my main house. I built a stone fire pit for Lily to roast marshmallows. We didn't talk much about our pasts. We talked about the work, the satisfying, honest work of fixing things that are broken. Lily began to smile. She laughed at my accent. She helped Garvin measure wood. She was safe. But the world has a way of finding you. It was Thursday afternoon when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. A long, winding trail of dirt kicked up by speeding vehicles. I was in the yard mixing mortar. Garvin was on the roof of the barn. "Company?" Garvin shouted down. I squinted. "That's a luxury SUV and a white van. That's not the sheriff." It was Jessica and Mateo, and they had brought reinforcements. The SUV screeched to a halt at the gate, which I had padlocked. The white van pulled up behind it. It had the logo of Secure Transport Solutions, a private medical transport company, the kind you hire when you want to drag a screaming relative to a locked facility. I walked to the gate, holding my trowel like a weapon. Garvin climbed down from the roof and stood 10 feet behind me, holding a hammer. Jessica jumped out of the car. She was wearing sunglasses and holding a stack of papers. Mateo looked like a ghost, pale and shaking. "Open the gate, Pablo," Jessica screamed. "We know you're here. The neighbors called us when they saw your truck." "Get off my property," I said calmly. "It's not your property anymore," she yelled. "I have an emergency court order. You are mentally incompetent. We have medical power of attorney effective immediately. These gentlemen are here to take you to Sunset Meadows for an evaluation." 2 large men in scrubs stepped out of the van. They looked like bouncers. "Mateo," I said, looking at my son, "is this what you want? To let your wife drag your father away in a van?" Mateo looked down. "Dad, please. You're not well. You sold the house. You're acting crazy. It's for your own good." "He's not opening it," Jessica snapped to the men. "Cut the lock." One of the men pulled a pair of bolt cutters from the van. "Hey!" Garvin stepped forward. His voice boomed. It wasn't the voice of a kidnapper. It was the voice of a site foreman. "You touch that gate, and you're violating federal trespassing laws. And since this is a rural zone, I'd worry less about the law and more about what we do to intruders." Jessica looked at Garvin confused. "Who is this? Another senile old friend?" "I'm his legal counsel," Garvin lied smoothly. "And I'm telling you that your emergency order is invalid because he is not currently in the jurisdiction of the judge who signed it. Furthermore, if you cross this line, I will consider it a home invasion." The man with the bolt cutters hesitated. "Do it!" Jessica shrieked. "He's bluffing!" The lock snapped. The gate swung open. The 2 large men started walking up the driveway. I tightened my grip on the trowel. I am 68, but I have hands that can crush stone. I was ready to fight. "Stop!" The scream came from the cabin. We all turned. It wasn't Lily. It was Sarah. I hadn't seen the second car arrive. While we were focused on the front gate, a beat-up sedan had driven across the backfield, cutting through the corn. A woman stumbled out looking wild-eyed and disheveled. She was thin, shaking, and clearly going through withdrawals. "Where is she?" Sarah screamed. "Where is my daughter?" Garvin went pale. "Sarah!" "You stole her!" Sarah lunged at Garvin, clawing at his face. "You old bastard! I called the cops. They're on their way. They tracked your phone." The scene descended into chaos. The men from the transport van stopped, confused. Jessica looked at Sarah, then at Garvin. You're the kidnapper from the news, Jessica said, her eyes widening. A smile spread across her face. Oh, this is perfect. Pablo, you're harboring a felon. This proves everything. You are insane and dangerous. Daddy! Lily ran out of the cabin. She didn't run to Sarah. She ran to Garvin. She buried her face in his legs. Sarah tried to grab her. Get away from him! Come to Mommy! Lily screamed. No! You hurt me! I don't want to go! Garvin shielded Lily with his body. You're not taking her, Sarah. Look at yourself. You can barely stand. I'm her mother, Sarah shrieked. And I am her grandfather, Garvin roared. Jessica turned to the transport men. Grab Pablo. Now. While everyone is distracted. Get him in the van. The men lunged at me. I swung the trowel, hitting one in the shoulder, but the other one tackled me to the gravel. My breath left my lungs. I felt a needle prick my arm. A sedative. They were prepared. No! Garvin shouted. He tried to move toward me, but Sarah was clawing at him, and he was holding Lily. Get him in the van! Jessica yelled, laughing. We win, Pablo! We win! I felt the world spinning. The sedative was fast. I saw Mateo standing by the car, crying. I saw Garvin trying to shake off his daughter. I saw the end. And then the sirens wailed. Not one siren, a dozen. State troopers, sheriff's deputies, and an ambulance swarmed the driveway. Blue and red lights blinded us. Everybody on the ground! Now! A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. The transport men released me. I gasped for air, the gravel digging into my cheek. It's him! Jessica pointed at Garvin. He's the kidnapper. And he, she pointed at me, is helping him. The officers advanced, guns drawn. They pulled Sarah off Garvin. They pulled Garvin to the ground. They took Lily, who was screaming for her grandpa. A sheriff's deputy knelt beside me. Sir, are you okay? I'm being abducted, I slurred, fighting the drug. I pointed at Jessica. She hired them. The next hour was a blur of questioning, handcuffs, and shouting. Garvin was handcuffed and placed in the back of a cruiser. Sarah was being treated by paramedics for withdrawal symptoms. She was hysterical. Lily was with a child protective services worker, clutching a stuffed bear Garvin had given her. I was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, the sedative making my limbs heavy. The sheriff approached me. He was a stern man I had known for years. Pablo, he said, you've got a hell of a mess here. A kidnapped girl, a private rendition team trying to drug you. What is going on? Garvin saved that girl, I said, my voice thick. Look at her arm, Sheriff. Look at the bruise. He didn't kidnap her. He rescued her. That's for the courts to decide, the sheriff said. And as for you, your daughter-in-law produced a court order. It's based on lies, I said. Check the timestamp. She filed it after I sold the house. It's retaliation. And those men, I pointed to the transport crew who were now being zip-tied by deputies, assaulted me on private property. I want to press charges. The sheriff looked at Jessica, who was now screaming at a deputy that she knew the mayor. He looked at Mateo, who was sitting on the ground, head in hands. We'll sort it out, the sheriff said. I stumbled over to the cruiser where Garvin was held. The window was down. He looked tired, defeated. I'm sorry, Pablo, he said. I brought this on you. No, I said, gripping the window frame. You gave me a reason to fight. Listen to me. I have money now. From the house sale. I will hire the best lawyer in the state for you. I will hire the best family law attorney for Lily. Sarah will not get her back. Not after they see the state she is in. Garvin looked at me, tears in his eyes. Why? Because we are builders, I said. We fix things. Epilogue, 3 months later. I am writing this from the porch of my farmhouse. It is quiet here. Garvin is currently serving a 2-year sentence for custodial interference. It was a plea deal. My lawyer, the shark I hired with the house money, argued necessity defense. The judge was lenient after seeing the photos of the house and the medical report on Sarah's addiction. Lily is in foster care, but it is a kinship placement. She is living with Garvin's sister, a kind woman who brings her to visit the prison every Sunday. Sarah is in court-ordered rehab. If she fails, Garvin gets full custody upon his release. As for me, Jessica is facing charges for attempted kidnapping and assault. The secure transport company rolled over on her immediately to save their licenses. They admitted she paid them extra to bypass protocol. The court order she waved around? It was a forgery. She had faked a judge's signature. Mateo divorced her. He lost everything in the process. He came to see me last week. He asked if he could stay in the guest cabin. I told him no. I told him the guest cabin is reserved for a friend, a structural engineer who gets out in 21 months. I forgave my son, but I will not enable him. He needs to build his own foundation. I sit here drinking my coffee, watching the sunset over the cornfields. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I have a purpose. I am maintaining the property. I am keeping the guest cabin ready. Because when Garvin gets out, we have work to do. We're going to build a deck. Thank you for listening to our story. It started with a kidnapping and an eviction, and it ended with justice. Here is my final message to you. Family isn't just DNA. It isn't just the people who share your last name. Family are the people who stand by you when the gate is breached. Family are the people who spot the rot in the foundation and help you fix it, rather than painting over it. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, did I do the right thing by turning my son away? Or is a father's job never done?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.